Hey, Sterile Processing Universe, I want to welcome you back to the Be Prepared conference. No instrument left behind. Thank you for sticking with us through your break. We have another great session ahead of us. And so my name is Bobby Parker. I'm the VP of Clinical Solutions here at Beyond Clean. And before we get started into this session, I want to draw your attention to a couple of features on your screen. You'll notice there is a sponsor resources or downloadable resources section on your screen where you can find some additional information from our event sponsor, Askulapp, today. You'll also find an Ask a Question bubble. That Q&A section is a great opportunity throughout the course of this session for you to ask questions about the content. And then depending on how long the session goes, we will be able to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation to go over those. And you'll also find a speaker bio tool where you'll find some additional information about our speaker and their contact information. So if you have any further questions and you want to get in touch with them after, you can do that there. And so today's speaker for our presentation is Angela Lewellyn, and she is the Director of Development and Research for Advantage Support Services, Inc. She has a notable 20 years of experience in surgical services and is considered a subject matter expert of best practices in sterile processing. Angela advocates and contributes to departmental development and cultural changes to increase the standard of care with a focus on building the profession of sterile processing. And today's presentation is about quality assurance for processing instrumentation, one that I'm quite excited to hear about. Quality assurance is something that I think every sterile processing department would like to know more about, would like to refine a little bit more. And so I just ask, do you feel confident in your team's approach to quality inspections in your sterile processing department? Angela is going to be joining us to outline some actionable steps that you can take to bring your next team huddle to help you and your team feel confident when establishing quality assurance process workflows, from uniform standards and compliance to cultivating staff ownership and the mission of safe surgical care. Angela is here to help set up your department for long-term success. And so with that, please join me in welcoming in Angela to the virtual stage.
Good morning.
All right, welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So being prepared, this topic is a great subject to leave no instrument left behind. And today what we're going to do is talk to you a little bit about some tools. We're going to provide some tools for sterile processing. I'm sorry, let me click to the next slide. Takes a second here. So we're going to define and demonstrate each step of the process in sterilization. Now, I know we all know each step in the process, but getting back to just a standard of care and back to best practices, actually a 101 class really, of what steps we need to really take to assure quality in the sterilization process, and then to demonstrate how compliance to AORN, AAMI standards will create that uniform care. They really give us some good guidance, and then to demonstrate the exception process. We're always trained of what to do, but what happens if it doesn't go as expected? And so we're going to show you some exception processes. We're going to define staff ownership of each process, and that really speaks to the quality of care in our culture in the department by creating these steps of ownership and quality. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about how to reduce some errors, and then we're going to provide you some tools that we've created at Advantage Support Services. Those tools are actually called Mr. Fick, final integrity checks. And so let's talk a little bit about quality assurance, the importance of it. We all know the importance of it, but how to implement those quality steps in our practices, it can be a little tricky. And what kind of time do we have to really ensure those processes are there? We actually teach through our program at Advantage 7 quality checkpoints like a manufacturer. And so before it leaves one stage and reaches another set of hands or touch points, there's a quality check to each one of those, and we're going to talk about that. And this really is going to lessen the risk that can be achievable only if reusable medical devices are how they're handled at the point of use and care and handling in the operating room, how they're transported, cleaned, decontaminated. In all areas of the hospital, it depends on the staff to ensure. These are the things the operating room wants, and the things that we in sterile processing really want to deliver: clean, sterile, complete trays, and on time. And on time can get a little tricky because of instrument volume, the amounts we have, the caseload demands. So that's a little trickier, but to accomplish clean, sterile, and on time, we can create the standards, operating procedures, the policy and procedures, and then those policy and procedures can be huddled about. So when you have your Wednesday huddle or each shift huddle, or even an education day, maybe on Wednesdays or whenever you have them, that's a 5-minute part of a huddle or an education day, just to have your supervisor, lead, if you have an educator, or even technicians, take those policy and procedures and kind of read through them and go through them with the whole team, and we just really acclimate ourselves to what the expectations our facility wants us to have. We have to create some exception processes, and this is developing the culture in your department so that the leadership gives that ownership of the processes to the tech level. The most valuable people on the team are decontam, assembly, sterilization technicians. And so if they have some ownership, they can have some, you can huddle and give them some processes that if this goes wrong, if A goes wrong, we can do B, and give them some options of things to do. We're going to create some tools to monitor the process by following and implementing the assurances that we set in place. That takes a lot of training, and we're going to talk about that. It's a little hit for the department to train staff because we think it takes away from productivity, when in actuality, the way that it's implemented can be done in productivity time and really assures that things aren't coming back to us to have to reprocess that didn't go well in the operating room. And then to train and cross-train all of your staff, we've audited, I don't know how many departments across the country, and sometimes we see that decontamination technicians are decontamination technicians, and they're not cross-trained to the rest of the instrument process, sterilization, or even in assembly. AORN gives us some quality controls to create an orientation program, to document competencies, to track unusual occurrences. So AORN has given us some guidelines as well. And it's taken a minute for the slides. I apologize for that. So what is the cost of implementing a standard process? When you implement, let's say, a quality step or several in your department, it takes time and it is a slow process. And what this means is to implement and acclimate to it so it's just second nature to us to be able to do these quality checks at each step of the process from the point of use, when we receive it in decontam, and then we'll talk about all the steps moving forward in a minute. But each touch point is a quality check. And to implement those quality checks in our day-to-day processes, it does take time. Let me just say on a side note, if your department implements quality checks and the technicians are beginning to learn them and acclimate them into their into their daily processes and touch points and tasks that they do every day. And somebody, a technician, misses a step or doesn't follow the process. The leadership and the department as a whole should have a timeline that it's not a corrective action to hold them accountable as to hold them accountable for, let's say they're getting kind of dinged for it or corrected harshly for it. There is a learning curve when we are initiating processes. And so together, collectively, you should decide, okay, in 3 months, in 6 months, how much time should we allow for this process to really be in our tasks and in our daily tasks so that we can reteach. There is a learning curve. Staff should get cross-trained to all practices, creating accountability. And then once it's implemented, this does save time. It reduces the numbers of items returned, and it produces a quality product for the end user, which gives us, as the technicians, all the steps and all the things, hard work we put into putting one tray together, really gives us some satisfaction within the department. It costs staff to train. It costs the department to train staff and to cross-train as well. There should be a preceptor program. And a preceptor program is not really because you've been here 20 years and you know our instruments and our ways. A preceptor program is a little bit more than just that. It is, there are some delivery tools and some tasks that we can teach those preceptors of how to present the information, how to receive return demonstrations, and how to really precept through. It's not just like in the operating room, see one, do one, see one, teach one. It really is acclimating the technicians over and over and over again. There should be a learning curve and a retraining program. And then we compare the delay of training to the current delays in production resulting from poor quality outcomes in returned instruments. Consider the long-term benefits of a fully cross-trained staff and creates the ownership the staff takes with each other and within their own department. A lot of times when I give a speech, I talk to technicians that we spend more time with each other than we do our own families sometimes, most of the time actually. And to take that staff ownership, it's like your house. This is your house. So when you're taking care of the process, the instruments and all the touch points and helping each other, if you see a coworker missing a step, it's a gentle reminder and we can help each other. This is the process we're all very familiar with, from point of use through storage, and all of these 8 steps have quality checkpoints that need to be instilled in a department, and even a lot of them recorded. This slide is going to turn any second now, I promise. And Bobby's, I think, listening in. There we go. So let's just talk about step 1. OR team must inspect the sterile instruments for bioburden when they get them, right? And we know this, and they're trained to do this through their technical school. So surgical technologists are an implement just a really intricate part of our process when they're receiving them and when they are delivering them. Visual inspection at the point of use would be the external indicator. That could be the locks or the tape, filters if they're in place or without holes, are they intact? Internal integrator has turned, and also if trays are wrapped, they should unwrap the tray, hold it up to a light and inspect it for holes as well. They're also looking for blood, bone, and tissue or any bioburden in the tray before it reaches their back table. And a lot of times, if there's trouble trays or there's a misstep and it's a continued misstep that might be happening within the department that we haven't had a chance to correct yet, surgical technologists might take those trays and put them on a separate prep stand that's sterile, has a sterile drape on it to inspect for any missteps that we might have taken in processing the tray in sterile processing. Quality controls of unloading, sterilizer unloading, and staff expectations. The external CI should visually denote that the package has been exposed. The indicator should be examined after sterilization. Internal CIs should be in each package and retrieved at the time of use and interpreted by the user. So this is where our expertise comes in place. So the operating room, a lot of times they know if the internal integrator passes a certain line, they can receive it and take the tray and put it on their sterile back table. But this is again, part of their process, but this is our expertise. And so a lot of times when we're providing our expertise and really understanding the value we have in the operating room, a lot of times in huddles, we can be the trainers as well. We can teach the operating room these simple steps, especially if they're new to the operating room and acclimating to them. I know they have an operating room educator, but understand our value as educators as well, because this is our expertise. Decontamination at the end of the case. At the end of a surgical case, the OR team must ensure it's free from gross contamination, sharps, the instruments are moist somehow before they send them down, either spraying them or using a gel, some kind of pre-enzymatic, and maybe separating it with a huck towel. Now, what does gross contamination mean and gross bioburden? This top left picture is clearly gross bioburden, but we're going to talk about what does that mean? How much do we have to remove in the operating room as surgical technologists? And that's getting defined a little better through some AMI documents currently, but this clearly left top picture would not be sent like this to decontamination areas and transported in this manner. And so we're going to talk about ways that the operating room can actually reduce that. The gross soil should be removed at the point of use. So how can they do that? They're not going to use saline. They can have a sterile basin in a ring stand or somewhere on a separate cart somewhere in the operating room, or even on their back table labeled for sterile water. So they're not going to use saline to remove all the gross soil. And how much gross soil should they remove? If there is cement, if there is bone in a rongeur, cement on orthopedic instruments, clear large amounts of blood, bone, or tissue on an instrument, it can be removed by using that sterile water. It doesn't have to be cleaned intricately in the operating suite before it's transported, but the majority of the gross soil should be removed. AORN recommendations for at the point of use. Instruments could be wiped with sponges moistened with sterile water. Cannulated items should be irrigated or flushed with sterile water. Gross soil should be removed. Items must be moist before they're transported. A lot of times we used to go in several of the accounts that we had and facilities that we've trained in, and assured, Sterile Processing went through and assured that there was a bottle available for that spray in every OR suite. And so we did weekly checks on that and when we did rounds. Transporting items, they should be contained, of course, and you're really containing them because you're conscious, we're conscious, and the operating room is conscious of our job as infection prevention advocates to not transfer and cross-contaminate patients, other areas, ourselves, co-workers. And so we're really containing these instruments to assure that there is no cross-contamination. Decontam techs should inspect the delivered in the closed case card, the gross soils removed, the instruments are moist, and any sharps are removed. And so this is the first quality checkpoint that we can instill in our department right here at in decontamination when we receive the instruments. And then as a multidisciplinary team, which the sterile processing area should be part of, should talk to the operating room and within that multidisciplinary team to say and determine what is the decontamination tech's action to take if there's sharps in the tray, needles are in the needle holder, there's extreme gross amount of instruments, or the configuration of the case card, you know, there's heavy things on top of laparoscopic instruments or cords, and it could damage the instruments. So as a team, you can determine what is the decontamination's ownership, the exception process that they can take if there's an exception in the process, which means what action can they take to either report it, take a picture of it, record it somehow. Because again, it's a learning curve and a training tool. The decontamination tech receiving those instruments is the expert in his field or her field to record what the quality process was of transporting those instruments. Supervisory personnel from ANSI, AMI standards, all preparation and sterilization activities should be supervised and have some oversight. One of the things that we saw Joint Commission or accreditation inspectors citing hospitals for was the lack of oversight. And so supervisors in the process, in sterile processing, can be part of that oversight. So again, it's an ownership of our own house and our own department. Amy's also talking about and providing guidance for verification of cleaning. After completing the cleaning process, personnel should visually inspect each item. So everything that we're saying, it's not we are saying it, it's our personal opinion. It really is some guidance and regulations that we have to follow. Handling and inspection quality improvement process. There's an annex for it. The most common method of a visual inspection is lighted magnification. There's also a borescope that can inspect internal channels of cannulated or lumen items. We can have one of those borescopes in decontamination, but we also highly recommend that it is an assembly. Before we close the tray, we can inspect those channels as well. Another guideline is visual inspection combined with other verification methods that allow the assessment of the inner housing of channels, testing cleaning efficacy of equipment, monitoring key cleaning parameters. So in your department, you can assess, right now within your own facility, what is your cleaning verification process? And is it in all points of inspection? Are you just checking them when they come off the washer, a surface area? Are you also inspecting internal channels? And I think Everett has a question of how do we ensure visual quality checks are really done. We're going to give you some options here in just a minute, and this presentation will show you that. There's an assembly inspection. You're going to check, 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 and lots of checks before the tray is wrapped closed or the container lid is put on. You're checking for bioburden, checking filters, checking for count sheets. One of the things that we're recommending is are the quality checks on the count sheet? It's a good reminder. A lot of times we have done and processed these trays so many times, it's just second nature to us. And sometimes we need just a little quick reminder of these little steps that we can take to make sure before we close the tray that it's done. We're going to place the integrators on the count sheet, wherever you're going to place the integrator, so it's positioned in the most challenging area, but there's another one that can be placed so it's visually accessible to the technician or the circulator in the operating room that's opening that lid so they can assure that it's been exposed. You're going to make sure you're using the correct integrator for the type of sterilant that it was processed to. It's visible to the end user, as we said, and we're using the correct containers for that. And what that means is, here's an example of that. One technician that we, when we audited a department, one technician was efficient. I mean, really, her productivity was through the roof, and she was incredible. The challenge was she had a cart full of trays that she was going to assemble, and she had a cart for containers. And the containers did not, at the end of, although the tray was put together so well, the tray was put in the wrong container. If we don't have a printout that we can use to name that tray right then, and we're using pre-labeled containers sometimes, the right tray in the right container is essential, another quality checkpoint. And then here, for the question that was a little earlier, how do you ensure the quality was done, right? We developed a role in sterile processing called a quality assurance technician. It's an FTE on its own position. And this technician does put trays together, but they also, throughout the day, trays are staged. Once they're assembled, before they're locked down, they're staged on another cart. And that quality assurance technician goes through those trays throughout the day, increment times of the shift, and assures and has a second initial on the tray. So on the outside of the tray, you're writing your initials. It's coming right back to you if you put the tray together. It can come back to two people. It's okay to have a second look. And so consider two initials on a count sheet or on the external part of the tape, or if it's wrapped, or the rigid container, to assure sterility. And then another idea and way to assure sterility is that we can put trays together and then trade them with our coworkers who's in another next to us, the assembly table, and just check each other's tray and put two initials on it. That's one approach. Here's another approach, Mr. Fick. This is that quick reminder. We put it together so many times, it's just second nature. We could do it probably blindfolded, but we will miss steps because we are human. It's not intentional. we as technicians don't go to work to say, I'm going to make mistakes today. Their intention on every tray is to do it well. And this is just a quick reminder for our humanness that we could miss a step here or there. So let's just look at FIC, Mr. Fick, final integrity checks. It's free of bioburden. The filters are present. The initials are on the tray or the count sheet, and possibly a second look. The internal integrator is the right integrator for the type of sterilant that you're using. Count sheets are in place, the correct, and they're including the missing items. So if you just don't have enough equipment, instrumentation, and you're missing an item, it should go on the external tray as some kind of notification for the end user, or even case cart technicians that are putting these case carts together to show what's missing out of this tray, because they could possibly get it in a peel pack later this afternoon before tomorrow's cases. And if the container contains the correct instruments, right tray, right container. Stay with me. Don't leave me. Hang in there. Here we go. Here's the exception process. This is what I think that would be a great huddle or even team discussion within your team with your leadership. So if items with a bone in the rongeur are received on the clean side, what would you do? Do you take it back to decontam? Do you clean it on the clean side? I'm going to say almost every assembly area that we audit when we're called into hospitals, there are brushes on the clean side because they're making it shiny, they're possibly removing some bioburden and moving on. Remember that our #1 goal is instrumentation, clean, sterile, complete, and on time. Right close to that is we are infection prevention advocates. So if we use a brush on the clean side and then lay the brush down on our assembly table, that brush now has microorganisms, possibly pathogenic, on them. And those multiply exponentially within 20 minutes. And so there's a lot of replication and duplication of those microbes. And we are actually making the assembly table that we're using and putting the new tray on exposed to the patient that just left that table, the instrumentation from the patient that it was used on before. So really determine what are you going to do to remove the brushes if you have them in your assembly area, and what are you going to do if you see blood, bone, and tissue on an instrument. If we take it back to decontam, how does it slow the process? And it does. If we clean it on the clean side, how will the decontamination tech know? Remember that if we take ownership of our processes, how are we going to have gentle reminders for each other to really help each other raise the standard of care and the bar in our facility? And then you're going to also look to replace it if you have static storage and things are already cleaned, easily accessible to replace that instrument. Excuse me. AORN is stating that for sponges, sharps, and instrument counts, instruments should be counted when sets are assembled for sterilization. They're also stating in their practice of cleaning care of surgical instrumentation that should be checked for function after cleaning. So do you have the right equipment and inspection tools at every assembly table to make sure that you can inspect the instrumentation for functionality? One of the things that we do and we'll suggest is how do the sterile processing technicians in your facility understand how the instruments are used and the impact on those instruments if they are not working correctly. So there's some tools that we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to inspect for functionality. The CI quality control, the chemical indicator should denote that the package has been exposed and it should be examined at the point of use. The internal integrator, another quality inspection check. These are all the recommendations from AORN or AMI that supports those steps that we said we were going to take before we close the tray. So what are the benefits of a second set of initials, a second look at each tray? If you're having bioburden or challenges, other challenges within the tray right now, how can you have a corrective action to, not a disciplinary action, a corrective action for your team to really take the time for the next 2 weeks to inspect every tray before it goes up. A second review may increase the processing time, but compare this to the risk of infection for the patient. And the reprocessing time, the extra steps we have to take when it's all sent back to us and we have to reprocess them and they weren't used on the patient. Now they're opening new trays and maybe just to get that one instrument out of if they've reconfigured their back table. So just consider the cost of really taking the time to do these quality checks and a second look. Consider the delays in start times if there is contamination. They have to replace the sets, break down the table. There's a discussion now between sterile processing and the operating room versus having all the items ready to go because you did a second check. And it just really assures. I sometimes hear technicians tell me, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. And I know you know. And we're all really, truly experts in sterile processing. This is our house. We belong to this and it belongs to us. And we're always trying to do a great job on every tray, but to consider a second look because we also take ownership of our humanness and sometimes we can miss steps and it's okay to do. It's not challenging, I think, for the technician to help each other get better. Using a quality process versus cutting corners. So the OR, let's say for an example, they miss spraying the instruments with an enzymatic spray or gel, or keeping it moist even with a moist towel separating or putting it over the used instruments. The decontamination misses cleaning the lumen with an internal inspection. The assembly misses checking an instrument, and then the instrument complete sterilization process, and the OR uses it on a patient. So let's just talk about in your community. I know a lot of us are traveling right now in other hospitals, but we're responsible for that community as well, for that patient care. We may not put our hands directly on the patient and be in the operating room surgical procedure, but we impact that patient exponentially by just missing one step. And you can see how easily in this 4-part process, how one step could get missed because we're short-staffed, we're overworked, the instrument load is just, backed up down the hallway. And we understand all of those things, but if we had a second look for a quality check, how can this impact patient care and really serve the community that we're in? When you're looking at the next quality check, and all of these slides, they can you can take them and configure them to your liking and what helps you the best for your facility, and stage them, laminate them, and post them above sterilizers or in assembly tables or off of the washer or before instruments go in the washer. Those 7 stages of inspection, like a manufacturer, are really helpful. So you can use these tools. And so 3 stages of sterilization quality assurance. The external indicators, filters in place, 2 initials, the lot numbers are in place. So when the items are released to storage and before, this is before the cart enters the sterilization chamber, you're going to do these checks. When it comes off of the sterilization chamber, out of the sterilizer chamber, if it's a steam sterilizer, you're going to do these checks, and then again before it's released. One of the things that some hospitals have challenges with might be holes in the wrap or wet trays or exceptions, right? Those are exceptions to a best practice process. So let's say you're having holes in the tray. You're going to inspect, hold it up, just like the operating room does. Hold it up to a light, make sure there's no holes before you wrap the tray. And then when the instrument cart goes into the sterilizer and it's wrapped, you're going to look and hold those packages up and look for holes. And then when they are coming out of the sterilizer, they're cooled, they're either going to a case cart or to sterile storage, you're going to inspect for holes then. And if you're having holes in the wrapper, this is your issue, just for an example, you can record that, because a lot of times whoever's initials were on that tray, are held accountable for the holes in the wrapper. So let's initial and document during this process of trying to figure out why there are holes in the wrapper. Let's document our process so we can assure and let the operating room or the end users know we're doing everything we can to assure there's no holes in the wrap. The sterilizer cart unloading and inspection after unloading. These are some tools that you can use and post before and after the instruments are loaded into a chamber. Loading the sterilizer with an inspection, a second inspection look. When I first started in sterile processing, I would use the gun to help sticker all the loads. And I swanny every time that gun was left on the sterilizer cart, and I melted that thing every time until I figured out I have to remove this. I needed a little reminder to remove the gun and not place it on the load cart before it goes into a steam sterilizer. So little things like that sometimes, if we're having some challenges during those challenging times or continued in your daily process, to have a second inspection. And this is another Mr. Fick suggestion when you're loading a cart that you can place above it. Unloading the cart, you're doing the same thing. And right here, somewhere near the sterilizer, you can have a laminated Mr. Fick sign to say, did we do these checks? Just because we are human and the process demands are high. Sterilization records, I'm going to say, need to be inspected on every shift. And I know a lot of people do them maybe at midnight, weekly audits, but I want to suggest that because this is a legal document, we're held accountable to it. It really assures the level of sterility, especially for auditors that come in and inspect your processes, to inspect those records on every shift. At the end of the shift, you can appoint a certain important person, lead tech supervisor, to audit those records. A lot of times they're on paper and held within an envelope, or they're electronic, and both need to be inspected to make sure that we have initialed and documented everything. It is a legal document. I think that once you go through this, I don't know if the slides are available. We can make them available for you if need, just reach out. But you can take some of these recommendations in those inspection process steps and quality assurance steps and use them as a tool, post them in your department, huddle about them, go through education day and just choose one and start to implement these steps into your task that it becomes second nature. And we do this as blindfolded as we do and process the trays now, just it's second nature to us. So to acclimate to a quality process, it does take time. There should be a learning curve. It's not a disciplinary action. If somebody misses a steps, it's a reteaching tool. And we're really trying to raise the bar and develop a culture of quality within our department. Audits and processing, you're evaluating and monitoring the effectiveness of the process. A lot of times we say, hey, a great process would be this, and it looks good on paper, but we need to trial it and see. The technicians, again, the experts in the department, can really trial it and let you know and give you feedback as leaders if this is doable or not, if this really works. They can also implement, if we went left here or right there in a process, they can really give you, the leader of establishing a quality program, feedback in real time as the experts in their field of what works within your own department. We want to thank you for the time and allowing us to share some quality tips. If there's any questions, I think Bobby can jump on and let us know.
Sure thing. Yeah, Angela, thank you for that awesome presentation. And you threw a lot at us there. There's a lot of things that we could spend time talking about. I guess at this time, let me switch this over so you can see both of us there. At this time, I will walk us through some time for question and answers. There's a few already in here that we'll pitch, but if you have any additional questions that you'd like answered, go ahead and put them in there, even if you don't think that we're going to have time to get to them today, because we will email these over to our speaker if we don't have time to get to them. The first question that I wanted to pitch your way, Angela, was related to that sterilizer loading question. Somebody mentioned that in their facility, they put the sterilizer load stickers on after the sterilization cycle has been completed, as it's coming out of the sterilizer, and just some process challenges associated with that. Do you have any advice on when's the ideal time to affix that load control lot sticker?
We've seen that sometimes when people are having challenges with wet loads or different things, they're not putting that paper on there. Or the challenge is, unless you have a quality process and you're assuring that the technician putting the load in is taking the load out, I can say there could be some challenges with putting those lot stickers on after the sterilization is complete. But if you have some quality controls to assure that the load stickers are put on, that if you get a recall, a wet load, if you have to recall any of those trays once they're sent out to storage or the end user, that you could track it back. It's a step that we really have to ensure is completed. When technicians, normally in the past and all these years previously, it's been just a common practice when we're loading and doing the load configuration for a steam sterilizer or any sterilizer to put the load sticker on. So it is a retraining process. If you want to talk about it a little after this, we can go into more detail, but I think it's really a training process to assure that those lot stickers are put on, because it could be a huge challenge. And one technician loading it, another technician or another shift unloading it. If it's not cross-trained between all shifts, it could be a challenge. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit more in detail after this if you'd like to reach out.
Yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. That can definitely be a challenge. One of the questions that I wanted to ask, you had suggested this idea of having a quality assurance technician to assist your department in making many of the quality checks that
Yes,
you put before us, and I appreciated the broad scope of your presentation and all the different ways that we can make a whole quality department or a whole quality program for the department. But asking on behalf of that department that maybe doesn't have an FTE assigned for a
yes.
quality assurance technician, they can't necessarily get that approved just yet, and staffing is tight, and they hear this presentation and they feel overwhelmed at all the different fires that need to be put out at once. Where would you recommend just a practical place to start, going from no quality program, just processing it according to the way that we've always done it, and sending it to the OR, to moving in the direction of having a solid quality program?
If you, and that is such a fair question, and in these current days and times of lack of staff, when I totally understand to get another FTE would be a challenge. I think specifically for a job description written and approved, and all the processes that have to happen just to get the extra FTE. But initially, the best and quickest way to assure quality is that second check. And it takes a hit on productivity time wise to do a second check. But if we had these little Mr. Fick or some kind of expectations and things that are posted for that second technician to take a look at, and even switching trays, it literally takes 1.5 minutes to check to have a second look at each other's tray. You're looking for tray configurations, filters in place, no bioburden, even lifting the instruments up, tray liners, holes in wrappers. You have these little bullets that are posted for on each assembly table to even quality check each other's trays. And the other thing that you can do is lead technicians and supervisors, if you had a staging cart, you can put the trays together, put them on a staging cart at the end of the assembly area before they go on a load sterilizer cart, or load that sterilizer cart, and throughout the day have increment times that a lead technician or supervisor could go through and do those quality checks as well, especially if you don't have enough technicians, which is the story today. Nobody has enough technicians. So there are other ways to do that other than getting an FTE. The goal moving forward, and understand a quality process doesn't change today. Now, if we put this in place today, tomorrow, all the trays are going to be perfect. No, it takes months, and our goal is, what are we trying to do for this department and our end user? A quality process is, what are we going to be doing this time next year, this time in 6 months? Do we want to still have the same issues today in 6 months that we're having today, or have a process and program in place to start correcting those actions? I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, I do.
It's hard.
I do think
I mean,
that. Yeah, I do think that's helpful, and it is hard. One
Yeah.
thing that I thought was also particularly helpful from your presentation, and it was early on as you described what quality looks like, is you started with standard procedures. If you're a department out there that has kind of unwritten rules about how things are supposed to be done, and there's a lot of disagreements even between your trainers and new employees about how we're supposed to do things, a lot of times a good first step to take is get some agreed upon policies and procedures about how we're going to do things, the order of which sink is going to come first in decontam, what order we're going to put our trays together in, where we're going to put our filters and our indicators, what our sterilizer documentation is going to look like, and kind of set the standard that's expected first. And then to your point, Angela, making those checks are a lot faster, a lot more effective, and can really be incorporated into that workflow stream instead of having to always be popping open sterile sets to do quality checks, but finding ways that we can get the quality checks incorporated into the way that we do things. So yeah, I do think that
Yes.
is really helpful.
Yes.
Um, One other question that just came through related to that sterilization documentation piece of it. Do you have any thoughts on whether those documents need to be kept on site and how long they should be kept before they're discarded or destroyed?
It's up to your facility to write, again, a policy of how long you want to keep them. 3 years on site. I've seen 7 years in a storage unit accessible. Past that, I don't think you need them. But 3 years on site, or maybe in a storage unit. A lot of times they're off site for some reason, but there's a storage unit you could keep them 3 years. I've heard 7 years, but 3 years for sure.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you to check with your local and state regulations. That requirement for how long a medical facility needs to have access to those records differs by state, and so depending on where you are in the country, will give you a different answer to that number. And so definitely check into
That's
that.
true.
And it's also a good
Yeah.
opportunity to plug. It's a good opportunity to plug the paperless solution for documentation of sterilization records, so that you can have them indefinitely and that they're always audit ready. You don't have to call a warehouse to get a box brought back in to pull up a record. And so, if you have the means and the blessing of a capable tracking system to move towards paperless, I think that is definitely a great way to go. There's another question in here about loading rigid containers. They have a small sterilizer, a size of chamber that is difficult for them to keep up with, I suppose. And they're asking about
Mm.
if rigid can be stacked with baskets in between with a height of 5 inches. Do you have any thoughts on that? I have a few thoughts, but I wanted to ask that to you as well.
Well, when you're using any device, sterilization devices, you always have to refer to manufacturer's instructions for use, and they're going to talk to you. Like a lot of times, if you're stacking rigid containers, some of them don't allow you to stack them because they don't have these little feet on the bottom, right? The idea for sterilization is to always have airflow. The sterilant can reach every area of the package. I think stacking them on a basket, I'm not sure if I understand that. Are you stacking the rigid container on a mesh pan and loading it in the sterilizer?
It sounds like
I'm
that's the
not sure.
question being asked. Yeah, it sounds like that's the question being asked, and I would just advise similarly to stick to what the IFU says and not get too creative with trying to invent ways to manufacture that airflow and to use the devices as they're designed. And so, certainly reach out to the manufacturer of your rigid container, manufacturer of your sterilizer, and ask those questions. But make sure you have in writing that what you're doing is appropriate, both for the safety of the patients, but also for your own risk. And when accreditation time comes around, they may have some questions about why you've chosen that process. We have time maybe for one more question here, and I guess we will close by asking this about your push for quality and education, and specifically for using these quality discoveries as opportunities to teach. Where do you see facilities should be, kind of what their default is and how they respond to errors, and then when that discussion crosses over from a coaching and teaching moment and an education moment to more of a discipline kind of conversation?
Yeah, it is tricky, and that is the culture of the leadership is going to determine this. And the technicians telling their story. The technician taking ownership and telling leadership their story about processes and their desire to follow best practices really helps. I think quality, we always think that if we have challenges, equipment challenges, that more people and more equipment is the answer, when we can actually use a lot of the current equipment and even technicians that we have to instill the quality program. And education is number one key to changing that culture. I think technicians telling their story and sharing in disciplinary, multidisciplinary teams, and even some decision making for the department is an integral part of them taking ownership and gaining the respect from leadership that they know that the technicians, leadership knows the technicians are trying to do the best thing, trying to do the best job that they can for their patient and the customer of the end user. And the more conversation that happens, the less disciplinary needs to happen. Does that make sense? I think technicians taking ownership and really joining in the decision process, adding to the decision process, and telling their story to leadership is key to having a culture of continual learning and not just a disciplinary action if mistakes are made.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And that is the foundation of it, of having that collaborative communication on the front end so that nobody's in the dark and then surprised whenever they've got a corrective action form that they need to sign about something that they didn't really have any input into. So, Angela, thank you so much for walking us through that. I hope that was very helpful to our listeners and our technicians out on the front line about how they can make an impact for their patients in their department. I certainly took a few great things away from that. So thank you for bringing that awesome presentation. For all of our attendees and listeners out there, thank you for hanging with us. We are now going to transition to a brief 15-minute break, and we are eager to see you back here for the next presentation. So hang on, and you should be directed in that direction. All right, we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.